The Ethiopian conflict in the Tigray region continues to intensify. Let's find out what is at the heart of this conflict. We're joined by Meron Dagnew. She is in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, and she is an Ethiopian. It's such a great pleasure to have you with us. Thank you very much for your time. I think perhaps just a little bit of a history lesson, if you can. It's so nuanced, the situation. But just bring us up to speed as to how we got here.
Sure. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you for having me on your program. Thank you very much. The lack of actually African representation in media has been one of the crucial challenges that we're facing here in Ethiopia, as well as other African countries. Well, Ethiopia started this journey way back. I think we can look at the times during the emperor, but most importantly, what we have to look at is the time after the revolution and after the Communist Party, the Derg came in. 17 years of presence as a leader in Ethiopia. Then he was ousted, Mengistu Haile Mariam was ousted by what we call the EPRDF, which is the Ethiopian coalition of Ethiopian regional representative called EPRDF, led by the TPLF, which is the Tigray Liberation Party. They ruled after the fall of the Derg regime. They ruled for about 27 years, led by a very charismatic leader called Meles Zenawi. However, it was a minority-led coalition led by the Tigray TPLF, like I said earlier, by the Tigray Liberation Front, TPLF, which we are now basically the main entity that we are speaking of is the TPLF. So after the 27 years rule, the people revolted because of many situations, including inflation, including a clause within the constitution of Ethiopia that basically allowed the right of tribes and regional people to the point of cessation. Then when most of the protest was happening about 3 years ago, some of the regions came in together to elect or to actually put our current prime minister called Abiy Ahmed into power. He had to finish the remaining term that was assigned to him, and then about 3 months ago in June of 2021, he was democratically elected by the people with a 90% approval rate within Ethiopia, minus the region of Tigray, who actually led an illegal election out of the federal government, which basically sparked the war that we are currently experiencing in Addis Ababa.
Come to today, the 13th of November, a lot is being said about Abiy Ahmed, some painting him as the villain in this situation, but you paint a very different story, right? So the situation in Ethiopia at the moment, what does that look like?
Well, the TPLF, when this war was ignited, it was actually an act, a treasonous act by the TPLF, which has been corroborated by their own statements, their own official statements, led by their communications officer called Getachew Reda. And they basically acted and went and killed the National Forces, Defense Forces that were actually located in the Tigray region. So that was taken by the people of Ethiopia and the government of Ethiopia as a treasonous act, and the law enforcement operation started exactly a year ago in November of last year. Then after a 6 month period of law enforcement, there was a lot of damage that was done within the Tigray region, but as well to the Ethiopian Defense Forces. As such, the Prime Minister basically ordered a unilateral ceasefire in June of this year, at which point we were hoping, the government as well as the rest of the Ethiopian people were hoping that would give some time to not only farmers, but the people of Tigray to come to their senses in their support of the TPLF. Well, that did not go as planned, as the TPLF rebel forces, they have been deemed a terrorist group, not only by the Ethiopian government, but previously by the American government as well, years back. They started pushing into the different regions of Ethiopia, mainly the Amhara and the Afar regions, that would allow them, by penetrating into those regions, allow them a quarter into a third country, either Sudan or Djibouti. Thousands of people have died basically in the last few months, just as TPLF was moving forward into the different regions. About more than 7 million people are currently estimated to have been displaced out of their homes, out of the region, with no food supply and others. Now, what we have to understand here is not just the realities on the ground, is the narrative that has been going out internationally on the outside. It seems that the powers that be on the outside seem to have different interests, as they may, in supporting this terrorist rebel group called the TPLF. For the last year, we have seen media reports such as CNN and BBC, Reuters, Bloomberg, painting the TPLF as a freedom fighter, as one that is not causing pain and suffering to the people of Ethiopia. There's also a tendency that we're seeing of the Western narrative painting the prime minister as one that is creating all of the situation and responsible for everything, discounting the acts, the treasonous act of that TPLF is doing, and that has not been welcomed by the people of Ethiopia on the ground. So it seems that the narrative are completely different than the reality on the ground.
Ms. Meron, this insinuation at, this interference by the West, whether it be via media or any other means, what is their interest in that region?
Well, that region, the Horn of Africa, is a very important space when we look at not only current but previous geopolitical interests and the scrabble for Africa in terms of global supremacy. We have new players on the ground, as we've seen. There's China, there's Korea, and all others that are right now fighting to have their presences heard in Africa, in the larger vision of the geopolitical scenery. So it seems that there's a new scrabble for Africa that is going on, and what we are experiencing here in eastern part of Africa, specifically in Ethiopia, but also in Sudan, is this new hybrid proxy war that is being fought on our grounds. So that's what these narratives seem to be supporting, actually.
What has your observation in terms of response from the rest of the continental leaders and everyday Africans on the ground been?
Well, that is why we are here today. This started as I was expressing our sorrow in regards to our African brothers and sisters having the correct narrative of what is going on the grounds in Ethiopia. I'm currently based out of Ethiopia and also Ghana, Accra, Ghana, for business. And, my neighbors and my colleagues up across the board have no understanding, because most of the sources of information that they are finding is through Western media. The African Union is obviously one of the predominant, entities that is concerned and has the mandate to be able to speak on these issues. And we are hoping that we do go through an AU resolution or AU-led negotiation for our issues here in Africa. That is the nature of what the AU is, and that is what they are there for. But the narrative, the Western narrative, is to usurp the responsibilities of the AU, is to cut off the legs of the AU and to be able to take their matters in their own hands. And unfortunately, our African brothers and sisters are not receiving the right information to be able to either support or, lead in the pressure to stop this war that is going on, because they don't have the correct information per se.
As we understand it, at this hour, TPLF members are making their way to the capital. Are you aware of this? Is there a state of panic or a state of emergency that has been declared in the country?
I would not say a state of panic, but there is a state of emergency. Last we heard, as of last week, the TPLF had entered, some battalions had entered into the cities of Dese and Kombolcha, which are in the Amhara region. It's close to Addis Ababa, but not that close. It's about 300 kilometers away. And the narrative actually of CNN just last week that was broadcast is that created a huge state of panic, not for Ethiopians that are on the ground who have the correct information, but for those who are outside of Ethiopia, was that they were minutes, literally hours away from Addis, which again is fake news and creating a state of chaos and an illusion that Ethiopia is in chaos and that we're not managing our own situation. So the realities on the ground is that no, they're not close to Addis. Addis has definitely been protected. However, they've caused mayhem in that region and those cities specifically. But right now, as we speak, they have moved northwards, east towards the Bati area in order to be able, and the Afar region, that's where most of the fighting is happening currently, to be able, because they weren't capable of creating access in the western border to basically have a corridor to the Sudan front. So they are now trying to do that to Djibouti. So they're moving from the Dese, Kombolcha region upwards northeast to cut across to Djibouti. So that's where most of the fighting is going on. There is a current state of emergency that has been put out by the federal government, by the central government, for Addis residents to stay alert. To be vigilant, of course, to protect our own neighborhoods, and to call upon the people of Ethiopia per se. And that statement, even from our Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, has been taken by foreign media, specifically, actually, our press communique, our Miss Delaney Siyu, was actually on CNN the other day regarding these issues, and CNN was actually stating that the conversation that was made by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed was to arm every civilian, to say we're going to bury our enemies, was to actually arm, and was alarmist, and it was pushing for violence. There is no such thing. We don't read our Prime Minister as such. When our Prime Minister says stay vigilant, Ethiopian citizens, protect your neighborhoods from the enemy, that is how we see it. We have to stay vigilant. The responsibility is on every Ethiopian to protect Ethiopia, not just the National Defense Forces.
Ms. Meron, I can tell just from speaking to you that you feel very passionately about the Horn of Africa. You feel very passionately about where you are and the correct kind of information filtering through to the public. Why? Because a proper analysis is very much necessary in order to have the proper African solutions to our African problems. We cannot have proper solutions by basing ourselves on fake, misguided, and delusional narratives of us. And there is a tendency by the West to bring down Africa, to show Africa as an inferior nation, as an inferior continent of people. And that cannot continue. And we Africans need to be able to wake up and work hard to be able to have our own narratives of ourselves in order to be able to have the right solutions for our people. This is a conversation we're definitely going to continue. Meron Dagnew is joining us from Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. Thank you very much for bringing us up to speed with what is happening in that region.